Hey guys, ET here from the Dice Matrix. I'd like to wish you all a great day. Welcome to my top 7 milestone games. What is a milestone game, you ask? Well, that's a good question. I often ask myself. Milestone games are games that I've played through my lifetime that have really made an impact on me for one reason or another. It might be particularly due to the game or to just a situation with my family or something. But yeah, I just thought this would be a fun list to make because I think in our life that we have different milestones. Like, if someone goes out and they get their first car or they do something else that, truly impacts them in some way, I thought that would be fun to do a relation to games this way. And so, not necessarily in chronological order, but some of these are. These are my top 7 milestone games. Starting with number 7 is, well, I'll start off with, I was about 6 years old. One of my older brothers, Mike, was a member of this certain group that got together and played games. And the game is chess. I learned how to play chess when I was 6 years old because Mike wanted to teach me just how the pieces moved so he could have a robot to play against. Because, especially back in the day, it was harder to get people over to play things that, the internet was not around, and so you didn't have different things to teach you, how to play or how to keep up or strategy moves. You had books, obviously, like there's plenty of books to rent from the library. But my brother Mike taught me how to play it, and I thought that was a great bonding moment. First of all, it was my first significant game. I'm sure, I played games like, hide and seek, or, I don't even know if I had Chutes and Ladders, but there was probably some little, kids game that I played at the time. But chess was the first significant thing that I was taught, and I ended up being not too bad at it. Nowadays, I'm horrible. I haven't played it in so long. 6-year-old people beat me all the time. These children walk around, they're just like, that's the best game you got? And I'm like, yep, that's all I got anymore. I just roll dice and hope things turn out right. Anyway, at number 7, my first really true milestone game was chess. Coming in at number 6 is a game that I got to play, and it's don't throw this video away, don't delete it, but it is Monopoly. When I reached a certain age, Monopoly was a game that the adults kind of played in my time, and all my older brothers played, and I was actually allowed to come to I call it come to the table, but it was the floor back then. We all played all our games on the floor. And to be able to play a game that had a lot of different things, you move pieces around the board, you had money, you had these properties, little tiny hotels and houses. It was pretty exciting. And just to be able to, being the youngest of 4 boys, to be able to play with all my older brothers, that was quite significant and impactful on me. And of course, Monopoly's been around for a jillion years, so in a million iterations of it. But anyway, Monopoly did make an impact on me just for that reason. I don't play Monopoly anymore, but I have to say it was a milestone in my life. So at number 6 is Monopoly, my milestone game. Coming in at number 5, many years after Monopoly and playing some games here and there, I ended up playing a game with some buddies over summer. I was probably in 7th grade, I guess, and they had Risk. And Risk is my game at this point. I never saw a game, at that point where you had, a whole world and you put out these armies and you're trying to take over the whole world against your other players. And there was some strategy, and of course you got to roll dice. Who doesn't love that? And you got to destroy other armies, and you watch them disappear, or you watch your armies disappear off the board. And people move all across the board and just taking up the territories. It was just such a fun concept, and I had such a good summer, and that kind of introduced me into a little larger world at the time. I probably could have played that years before that, but I had never had a chance to do so. But Risk, coming in at number 5, is my milestone game for there. Number 4 is, I'd say, more of a modern game. It's about 10 or 11 years old probably now. But it's Dominion, the deck building game. I had played. That's probably the most current one I think on my list. Let me check over here. Yeah, that's definitely the most current game on my list, because in the modern board gaming world, I see stuff all the time now. You know, you get introduced to mechanics like, oh, there's worker placement, but it's hard for something to really make an impression on me. You know, especially since I played other collectible card games like Magic, and there's one called Rage. I mean, I played a bunch of different things, so to see something that let me manipulate the cards in my hand as they grew was really like a, you know, moment, and that was pretty fantastic. Almost anybody introduced Dominion to just simply love it. Now from that point on, it doesn't have as much replayability as games that came after that do the same thing. Like I still to this day would rather play Star Realms, you know, because it's just fast and it's a science fiction themed game, and it just seems to take what Dominion did and maybe do it a little bit more into my wheelhouse to what I do. But as far as, you know, in the modern era, you know, it's harder and harder for games to, like, I consider to be a milestone game, but Dominion definitely was the one in the modern era here that made me look at games differently and say, wow, this is something they can do with cards that I had never really thought about before. And so, yeah, coming in at number 4 spot, Dominion. Number 3 game was somewhere after Risk and way before Dominion. My buddy Brian had a little game, like a miniatures game, and you would kind of a dungeon stomp, and it was called Heroquest. This game had like the best Saturday morning cartoon commercials that, you know, you would see the characters and the kids playing around the table, and it was, you know, like, oh, you're an adventurer, you're a warrior, and you're fighting skeletons or whatnot. Now, the sad truth is, I only got to play Heroquest a few times because my buddy Brian owned it, and it was hard to get over there as a kid. But man, let me tell you, just the idea of just moving something around on a board, and you're doing more than just like Monopoly moving pieces or whatnot. You know, you can go here, you're opening a door, you fight the monster, you get some treasure, and just the whole concept was just fantastic because it felt like I was immersed in it. Probably, definitely my most thematic, you know, first experience. So that was definitely a milestone game for me. So coming in at number 3 is Heroquest. Number 2 is the game that I've played more than any game on the planet. And even if I try to play new games, even if I played games that I love, like Imperial Assault or Blood Rage or Raiders of the North Sea, if I play these probably once a day for the next 10 years, I still will probably not have played as many games as I have the number 2 on my list, which is Magic the Gathering, created by Richard Garfield, the grandfather of all the CCGs. When I first saw this, I remember it was funny, my buddy Brian actually was doing the same thing. I was with another friend, we came back from fishing, we stopped at a Denny's, and when I came to find a booth to sit, I heard my name called out, and it was my buddy Brian with a bunch of his other friends, and he said, hey, you got to check this out, and he flashed up an old box. I've been playing Magic now for over 20 years. So that, first of all, tells you how old I am and how successful the game's been to be able to play it for that long. And I was like, what is this interesting box? He goes, yeah. And he was talking like 100 miles an hour. Like, look at these 5 colors, and they all have, you can put your deck together. And I'm like, what? You can build your own deck and you fight other people? He says, yeah, it's got wizard spells, it's got artifacts. And he's talking like this. But it was just so engrossing. My brain was just interpreting like I could hear every single word he said because it was just so like I was absorbing it. It was just so fascinating and interesting. Needless to say, within the next 2 days, I went out and bought a starter deck, and I was on my way. Me and my friend Billy, we got into it. I'd go over on my lunch break and I'd play it on just trying to figure out the rules, and I didn't even know half the rules. But Magic the Gathering is just so deep and so rich and immersive with so many mechanics, and that may be what makes it fun too, is because they keep introducing more and more mechanics. Now through the years, Magic's probably got a little convoluted because they just kind of kept revamping other things, but they're brilliant. I mean, they've survived decades now of being important and relevant. So still this day, I do love a good game of Magic. I don't play it as much as I used to, but I don't know if I'll ever play a game ever as much as I have, as many games of Magic the Gathering I have played. So at my number 2 spot, milestone game, Magic the Gathering. Coming in at numero uno, the game that probably has affected me the most as a Milestone game. By no means. I mean, I'd heard about it. This game had been around for a long time, but technically not a tabletop game. Although in the modern era, a lot of people call it tabletop because you can play it with miniatures. It is actually an RPG. My Milestone game was Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. The idea, the concept of doing something that I loved, because I loved watching, Schwarzenegger and all those Conan movies, and I just, I loved everything about that sort of thing, like the magic and big warriors and battling wizards, and the idea of Dungeons and Dragons actually immersing into it, not just learning the game where you have the dice that your characters do what you do, but you can play a character, like a role, like what do I want to do? This character is important, and then it's not like a video game. Your character can die, and odds are you may not get that character back. I mean, if you have a very kind DM, they may find a way for you to do that, but not necessary. So when I first immersed into it through my friend Darren, Big D, was my first DM, and he was amazing. It was just a great experience. I remember sitting around this huge table with about 8 people, and he was the dungeon master, and I was just absorbing, listening to what he was telling, how he was setting the scenarios, and of course the battle, which makes it very intriguing and a lot of people love. And the idea of leveling your character up, not like in a video game, but in an actual board game, it was just amazing. And to this day, I still play 5th edition, and I've played so many RPGs since then. But to me, the granddaddy and the Milestone game, to me, number 1 on my list of all time is Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And I just love to play that game, and I will probably continue to play it. And I don't get to hardly play it that much anymore, but I will continue to play it as long as I'm able to do so. All right, guys, thank you so much for being a part of my day, and thank you for hanging in there for my ramblings and babblings of my top 7 Milestone games. Until I see you next time, keep the dice rolling, and we'll see you on the Dice Matrix.